Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my video on journalism, the need to tell the truth. So what do you think journalism is? Well, it's the assemblage of facts about a subject and the preparation of a report to be inserted in media transmission, we could say newspaper, television news report, that kind of thing. But it's essential that it's accurate and truthful, to not give incorrect details to the audience. There have been many examples of untruthful reporting in the past, which have had serious consequences. The areas where incorrect reports or even made up stories themselves have the most damage are in cases of crime and also politics. So briefly, what is truth? Well, it's the facts or the actuality of the matter, the body of events and real things that actually happened or existed. And it's necessary for us all to always be truthful. It's in the Bible at Zechariah chapter 8, verse 16, that says, "These are the things that you shall all do. Speak the truth to one another. Render in your gates judgments that are true and make for peace." So if you don't tell the truth, then you're lying, aren't you? That's the unfortunate thing. So telling lies can be a serious matter. And clearly it's real events that are being discussed here. Such things as what a politician said, which is misquoted deliberately or taken out of context. Now, the writing of fiction or movie or TV scripts, this is made up information, but it's not classed as lies. Unless really you're talking about a real person and you say something that they've done which they haven't done without their permission. So a certain amount of poetic license is allowed, but you've still got to be careful. Well, what's journalism? According to Shapiro, journalism comprises the activities involved in an independent pursuit of accurate information about current or recent events and its original presentation for public edification. So that's a bit much, isn't it, to remember. But sometimes when you look at an item in a newspaper, you'll say, that's not journalism, is it? Just as defining poetry as an element of saying, blank verses, that ain't poetry. Not real poetry, anyway. A simple example would be a reporter asking questions of a person in the street. The person who's a stranger to the reporter. His question might be about politics, in which case he's merely asking for an opinion, which he may or may not use, or it may be about a local crime. And if his questions are such as, what did you see? Well, this is elucidation of facts and is journalism. According to Shapiro, there are 5 principles of design defined as news or news judgment, reporting or evidentiary method, linguistic technique, narrative technique, and method of interpretation or meaning. So journalism thus involves news, which in theory is fine. Journalists need to be free and self-governing when they're reporting news. But the world of journalism can be murky. Excuse me. It tends to be current events that are reported, but to make the journalist's story different, it'll include, as Shapiro says, attempts to contextualize, analyze, and interpret events rather than merely conveying the latest emerging facts. So then we come to the awful subject of fake news. That was defined by Tandrock as articles based on false information packaged to look like real news to deceive readers either for financial or ideological gain. So it's been around an awful long time as fake news. Sometimes it's accidental and amusing to the victim. Probably remember one from school about Mark Twain. His cousin had died, and this reporter thought it was Mark, and he checked with Mark's publisher before writing the obituary, thankfully. So it was nipped in the bud before it actually went public, but Twain still got mileage out of it, famously writing, "The report of my death was an exaggeration." There was a worse one, which was a website article from CNN in April 2003 that announced the death of a dozen famous people. But none of them were dead. It was a template that they were using for obituaries that borrowed texts from others. And the CNN were well embarrassed by that, I'll tell you. Fake news really came to the fore in the 2016 presidential elections. Things like the Pope Francis had endorsed Donald Trump, fake news, and claiming that Hillary Clinton and her former campaign managers operated in an underground child sex ring. Sorry, I'm reading my own writing. Yeah, so those two were quite serious, well, very serious. The reason it's done is that when people read fake news, the site usually has adverts on it, and so this could mean that whoever's put this fake news out gets some money for doing it. Also, there is a point, of course, that fake news at the time of an election could get someone to change their mind. If someone's put lies about, a candidate, and a reader believes it, then they will maybe change the vote for the other party. So that wouldn't be fair because it's based on fake news. It is described as a global threat by the New York Times, but most of it's found on Facebook, and they can't check every news story for accuracy. Nobody can do that. So as the viewer or reader, you have to use your own judgment. It started way back in the 19th century, before even I was born. It covered parliamentary debates, leader writing, and such like on the editorial staff. And then for all other type of news, they employed self-employed reporters, basically hacks. They were paid a penny a line, and so anything they wrote, they'd inflate to get them more money. And they did this by exaggerating and downright lying. And often these fake articles added product placement. You might have something about a hacker had written about an attempted burglary that was foiled by the make of safe. The most perhaps serious thing the press ever did was when the Jack the Ripper murders were going on in London. There was the famous Jack the Ripper letters. Well, the first one, it's believed, was written by someone working for Central News, and as Tate puts it, to add extra colour to an already frenzied news environment. Well, does the threat of libel prevent fake news? Not really, no. During the civil rights movement, there were threats from powerful, we'll call them white lobbies, to stop the New York Times printing certain things. They were basically bullied by public officials who use libel to silence press criticism. Obviously, eventually, that all got put right. But it's still happening. And in England, the News of the World newspaper had to close because of a massive raft of libel suits brought by celebrities whose phones were hacked by News of the World reporters. So loads of fake news items were published. So how does the reporting of crime produce fake news? Well, serial killers. Everyone, for some reason, is interested in them. But when a serial killer's caught, often you find that the reports prior to his or her capture contained fake news about the injuries that were suffered, because obviously the police keep quiet. They only give the press the medium or minimum of news. So you get these people becoming cultural myths, people like Son of Sam or Jack the Ripper. Now, I'm from Leeds in West Yorkshire in England, and where I lived was terrorised in the 1980s by, well, the 1970s and 80s, to be honest, by this chap, Peter Sutcliffe, whose nickname the press gave was the Yorkshire Ripper. He was a brute who murdered 13 women in the Leeds area. But the thing is, the press reported the injuries as far worse than they were. Some of them he had strangled, and that claimed that he'd carved them up with a screwdriver and such like, which he hadn't. I mean, there's not sticking up for the man, but you know, the press should have been more responsible and just put that we don't have details of the injuries. One particular newspaper, whose name I don't have, but it's a quote from Weast, talks about Ted Bundy being the new postmodern serial killer role model. Now, how irresponsible is that, to call a killer, a murderer like Bundy, a role model? That shows, to me anyway, a lack of public responsibility and morality. And then you get what they call copycat crimes, where someone will read of one of these serial killers and go out and do one using the same method. I mean, it comes in Hollywood films, we've seen that, but that doesn't help law enforcement. And we'll close on just a case back in 2010. There's a murder in Bristol, England. A young student was murdered, and a landlord was arrested on suspicion of murder. He was released, and another man was jailed for a murder. Now, it wasn't an extraordinary murder by any means, but the lies and twisted facts in the time between the landlord's arrest and his release were awful for him, the poor man. All sorts of half-truths and downright lies were told in the tabloids. And it's because he was an eccentric man. And he actually spoke in a peculiar accent. Well, later, the press apologised and paid out damages, thankfully. And this man got his life back. And in fact, he gave evidence to the Leveson inquiry into press standards. Now, this whole sordid affair was covered in an ITV award-winning drama called The Lost Honour of Christopher Jeffries, which ITV exonerated the poor man and restored his reputation. So, fake news. Journalism. Should they tell the truth? Well, yes. Despite the First Amendment, fake news is harmful and not funny. And it ought to be stopped so that we no longer have tragic cases like Christopher Jeffries. So, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it.